There is no ranking for Google ranking factors? Are web stories important? And how do you make them? Google has predatory site algorithms to deal with libelous content. You're listening to News from the Edge for the week of June 14th, 2021, here on Edge of the Web Radio.
From the Edge of the Web studios, here's what we're looking at this week.
This is Edge of the Web Radio. I'm your host, Mordy Oberstein. I am Mordy Oberstein, official liaison to the SEO community over at Wix. Every week, we bring you amazing guests to chat about trending digital marketing topics. Each week, we're covering the SEO and digital marketing news, separate from our weekly interview podcast, getting more news to you even more quickly. Be sure to check out our recent shows at edgeofthewebradio.com. Welcome to the Site Strategics Digital Marketing News Desk of Edge of the Web. Joining me this week to take it on is George Nguyen, editor at Third Door Media, better known as Search Engine Land. What's happening in the world of George?
Hey, Morty, I like the intro. I was hoping you'd do it in, that old 1950 style of, or where every headline has to rhyme.
Going Cronkite with the whole thing. I would pull out a cigarette, but I have a cold.
That's one of my goals as a journalist. Life is good. I went to my first in-person event last Friday, and it was.
Would that be horribly awkward if your first person live event was a funeral?
It was not a funeral, so
you're good.
I guess that would be awkward. I mean, how is it more awkward than a funeral, right? I guess you get to mourn together. I had a camera crew come to my house on Friday to film an interview for a video series that a company is doing. But I was surprised because I thought it was going to be like this, just over a call. But then they were like, yeah, we're going to send somebody over to actually film you. And I was like, you flew in from LA to do this? And he goes, oh, no, I was in the Cape anyway. We flew over for a funeral, and this just happens to be. And I was like, well,
there you go.
Over for a funeral and decided to hit up a work task on your way home. But yeah, it's weird to be back in person, but it is so joyous.
Unless you're at a funeral.
Yeah.
Jacob, did I break the show yet?
Oh, it's broken.
Yeah. By the way, just in case you have not realized, Erin Sparks is on vacation. I think I was supposed to say that earlier. But I didn't.
It was in the script.
I completely. Usually, if it's on the prompter, I'll read it. That's kind of my thing. I'm really disappointed in myself. Erin Sparks, the man with the deep voice, way better podcasting voice than I have, is not here with us today. He's not at a funeral. He's on vacation. So.
Oh, you didn't get promoted?
It's just me and George and Jacob. Jacob's here to make sure I don't break things. Literally, that's what Erin told him to do.
I'm doing my best. It's going to be tough.
I'm trying. There's so many things. The funeral thing was kind of borderline for me. I don't know if I was like, that was a good way to go, but we did it anyway. I guess that means we should probably take a look at our first article. Okay, coming over to us from, guess who? It's Barry Schwartz over at Search Engine Roundtable. Google ranking factors is a bad idea. Too many rankings in the title, Barry. Google's John Mueller said on Twitter that it is a bad idea for Google to try to rank its ranking factors, to say content is more important or less important than links, or to say that one search ranking factor is more important than another, was a bad idea for us to frame it that way, said John Mueller, referring to Andrei Lipatsev back, I think, in 2016, where he talked about the top 3 ranking factors, one of which is RankBrain. Now, what makes this one particularly odd to me is that you would include RankBrain altogether in your list of ranking factors, because RankBrain's not really a ranking factor. Machine learning is prior, right? Machine learning is what sets up the weighing of the various ranking factors, referring to RankBrain in particular. That's almost to me like saying, well, the SERP is a ranking factor because there's only 10 spots. The fact that you're not on page 1 because you're ranking number 11 is because of the SERP just not having enough space. So the SERP is a ranking factor. That's not how that actually works. It's not a ranking factor. Machine learning, RankBrain in particular, is what's going to be setting up the SERP or setting up the factors in such a way that it weighs which factor is more important for a given query. So machine learning or rank brain in particular referring to here is not actually a ranking factor. That makes no logical sense. So I'm not sure why that was included in the top 3 to begin with. Anyway, George, what are your thoughts on ranking factors?
Great title. Very. Ranking factors. I had to read that twice over. But it makes sense because if you've been following along with the way that search engines describe their ranking factors, especially Bing has been really upfront with this, saying that it's all machine learning. All the weighting changes constantly. And if we tell you that something changes, like right now, if we told you that the most important ranking factor was the length of your title, which it isn't. So don't do anything actionable based on that. But if in this hypothetical situation, they told you that, then people would go out and act on that. And then the machine learning model would take that into account and perhaps push that ranking factor a little bit further down in its weighting. And so knowing what the ranking factor is on, like at scale, if everybody else knows it, that means that they're going to change because of how much machine learning is involved. So somebody telling you that, you really have to question, first of all, why would they tell you this information if it's going to change anyway? And then secondly, you have to question, how useful is this information to you as a practitioner? We can, in a general sense, say like, oh, these are the few dozen most important things, but you're going to be hard pressed to figure out what the top 3 or top 10 are. And, over at Search Engine Land, our publication, we have the SEO periodic table, which we just launched a new version of it. So just go check it out. Quick plug there. But that has dozens of what we consider to be, ranking signals. And we weight them ourselves, but over the larger context, it's going to be really difficult to say that this weighting in say if it's an architecture consideration is going to be more important than quality content. That's just not how these things work. And you shouldn't really be cherry picking anyway.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much that goes on before the factors become a factor. I just did what Barry did. Google's ability to understand intent, Google's ability to understand the query, Google's ability to understand the content, all of those things factor in. Get away from that word. All of those things come in before you ever get to the particular ranking factors to begin with. So there's so much that's beyond the factor that's so important that why would you just focus on the ranking factors to begin with anyway? But besides that, you're right. It comes down, you need to have a more holistic, more conceptual understanding of SEO, so that you don't just think about, well, this factor and there's that factor, and I'll just optimize for all of these factors, which, by the way, I think it was Paul Hard came out maybe a month or 2 ago, again, terrible at times, possibly 3, possibly 4 months ago, saying don't think about the factors that we have, but think about why we have those factors. What are we trying to do with those factors? And that'll help you be a little more strategic about how you approach SEO or content strategy in general. So,
going back to like when did you say that those 3 ranking factors? It was a Google employee.
That was 2016. Yeah, that's when Rank Brain first became a thing. But no, I'm happy that John brought it up because people still do those sort of things. But I'll go back. The inclusion of Rank Brain is insane altogether. It's not a ranking factor.
It kind of makes you feel like I don't really know what the space was like in 2016, but it just seems unrealistic to even at that point have been able to say that these 3 things are the most important things, even though they're pretty compelling elements, except for the rank brain, which is kind of like, well, you have to look further into that because there's so much going on there. But
it's beyond the factor.
Yeah, even in 2016, was this a believable thing?
Yeah, it's a believable thing now, I think, which is the problem, in my opinion. Look, SEOs we like to have concrete things, whether it be checklists or templates and all that sort of great stuff. So being able to concretize the system, I think it offers a degree of emotional security. I don't want to go Freudian on everybody here, but it offers a degree of security that I don't think serves the community well, right? It's more important to understand things directionally sometimes and understanding, well, there's 200 factors. I know all of them, and I will now list them. But we still fall back to look, think about EAT, George, right? What's EAT? Well, it's an author bio. It's having your content reviewed by a medical professional. If it's medical, we break all these things down into these sort of concrete components and try to listify all of them, as opposed to taking a little bit more of a conceptual understanding of them, because that's a little bit less concrete.
That's a valid point. It just seems like those ranking factors that were listed from 2016 are just Oh, they just seem so unrealistic. I do believe that people want to be able to say, hey, this is important, especially because when you have to justify an investment from a client, it's easier to do that. But you can't mischaracterize what you're actually doing or how search engines rank things, because if you're doing that, then you're going to have to explain more things later on to your client and really just be honest up front.
Yeah, that's really there's a lot of complexities of why these things happen. But I agree with you. All right, moving on to article number 2. This one comes from the Google blog. It's 5 steps to create your first web story. Web stories are available on the open web, meaning they're crawlable by search engines, and you can share them and link to them just like any other web page. Google came out with a whole blog post talking about the 5 things that you should do, or 5 steps you should take to create your very first web story. Things like choosing a visual editor, picking out the graphic elements, or drafting the story, and so forth. Google lists 5 of these things. It's a nice short little video walking you through the creation of a web story. It's an interesting little topic. I don't think we've talked about web stories on the show. If we have, not enough. It's one of those elements where Google is really pushing things. I know we've had a conversation at Wix about them with Google trying to push for CMS platforms to do things that make creating web stories a little bit easier. But before I put my thumb on this scale, George, what do you think about Google putting out an article basically listing 5 ways to create web stories, a listicle of how to create web stories, your first web story, which I think is an important part of the title, by the way, your first web story. Take it away, George.
Google's going to do Google things, man. These were called AMP stories back in the day, weren't they?
Yeah. AMP stories, it's the same thing, basically.
Yeah. So I have never really run into this other than like the announcements. It's very rare for me to catch these in the wild. Sometimes I stumble upon them in the Discover feed. But every time Google puts something out about its web stories, I am reminded that they still exist and that they are still very unpopular, at least within the SEO community. I definitely see some publishers using it, but to what end? They're adding the ability to monetize, I believe, right? I think there's the ability to buy ads that go in between some of the stories. And so there's an incentive for Google to push this because it's like, hey, it's another way we're making money. But is it seeing traction from users? That's going to be the major question. I mean, if you ask somebody that you knew, just a regular person, how do you enjoy Google Web Stories? I'm sure the answer would be, what is that? Right? They're not even aware that they're seeing something in a special format. They might like the format, but they don't know what that is. Until it hits that critical mass of prevalence, I really don't think that it's a consideration for anybody, unless it's really the ideal way to deliver the type of content that you want to your audience. And in that case, then go for it. But otherwise, Google is just trying to get people to do something so that Google can continue to make money one way or another.
Honestly, the only time I've ever seen a web story out in the wild, outside, and I'll circle back to this, outside of Major League Baseball puts out web stories for every game. Actually, they build them during the game. So if you come in the middle of the game, you can catch up through the web story, which is, by the way, very cool. The only one I've ever seen live was Glenn Gabe did one, and I was specifically searching for it. But that's kind of my point. It's a funny post. I agree with you. There's an optic to this, right? 5 ways. It's almost like one of those SEO articles that you see. 5 easy ways to build backlinks. 5 easy ways to build your web story. And I think it was on purpose they put your first web story, as if to say, now it's time to get going with this. It's so easy. But outside of, there's 2 points. One is outside of these 5 elements that they listed. Okay, but now to actually technically create it, it's really hard. That's really the obstacle. That's one of the obstacles. There's 2. That's one of the major obstacles. That's why Google's approaching the CMSs about this. And there is an app on a plugin on WordPress that you can do. From what I've seen, people say that it's still very hard. It's very clunky. It's currently still in beta, I believe. Don't quote me on that. It's not easy to actually create this. So Google's creating this optic of, it's time to get going with web stories. Let's keep this fresh in people's minds. But then to actually go ahead and create one, it's really not as easy as it sounds. It's not accessible. And that's why you don't see them out there. And even, this is the second problem, I want you to think about this, George. Even though, let's say you had an app or a plugin or whatever it is, a program that will help you make them really quickly and really easily, great. But now you need to design elements. Now you need to have a graphic designer on staff for this, no?
This feels like the the publishing version of TikTok. Whenever I see it, it's always in that vertical format, and people have really short attention spans, and it's kind of the same interface to go to the next one, but it brings sort of a journalistic flair to it, which, there can be something there. But then again, TikTok has this air of like, well, if you see something that's really catchy, it's easy to share and it's viral. People don't really share articles in that same way. You're not going to find a groundbreaking piece of journalism condensed into a few slides, essentially, right? Unless somebody does, which would be awesome. And then all of a sudden the format will reach a lot more people, but nobody's really doing that. They do their journalism, long form, and it's gated. And then people find out about it because it's trending on Twitter. How many times have you seen a trending story be presented in a web story?
No. By the way, they back in the day, web publishers like CNN, or I think it was the Washington Post, was really hot on these for a while. They were the first ones to have access to this, and you still see them once in a rare while, or you have to specifically search for them, pop up. But the only place this seems to make sense is a big publisher, if they think that the format makes sense, because they're labor intensive, they're design intensive. You have to have somebody doing this. Like, creating content is already labor intensive and it's already cost intensive. Now you need to have somebody else do this for you. The fact that you see Google keep pushing this hard or in this funny sort of way kind of tells you that it's not being as successfully adopted as they would like. I guess time will tell. George, I want to see your first web story when it comes out.
It's just going to be photos of me and you, Morty.
With cat shirts that are on LSD, or will we have no shirts on? Will we have no shirts on in your fantasy of us doing a web story?
And the podcast is broken.
I'm just gonna say,
just like that.
I did it.
Is this for your OnlyFans, Morty? Is that what this is for?
Yeah, that's what it's.
Are we even on Edge of the Web? Is this why Erin isn't here?
Wait, is this a fake podcast they set up just to make me feel like I could break something?
No comment.
Wow, that would be an amazing prank. By the way, if there was another Edge of the Web news podcast coming out with Erin and some other SEO liaison,
we'll have a web story about it.
Ooh,
I don't think you could handle that.
Yeah, let's see Edge of the Web. Let's put in the put your money where your mouth is. Do a web story. Anyway, now would be a time for me to talk about our sponsor. We're proud to have Site Strategics as a sponsor of Edge of the Web. Site Strategics are pioneers in agile digital marketing. Their core specialties are technical SEO, including Core Web Vitals, SEM, social media, conversion optimization, results-based marketing that works. Site Strategics has also developed a unique omnichannel media marketing and content curation process guided by our weekly R&D from our Edge of the Web interviews. They incorporate the best techniques for content broadcast strategy and execution. If you're interested in what they can do for you, give them a call at 877-SEO for Web or 877-736-4932. At least I got the phone number right. But I totally forgot there's a second half to read.
You got it.
I got it. I nailed it. By the way, any new customers that come into Site Strategics, I want to cut.
Done.
You're really good at this, Morty.
I'm not authorized to make
that was the best cold read ever.
But I'm just going to go ahead and say done. And then
nice. By the way, I'm looking at Barry's shirt right behind Jacob, the cat from SMX.
Yes.
George, when are you sending in your shirt to Jacob?
What is this? Some like bizarre collection of our shirts at
exactly what it is.
I can't believe you got it framed.
What about the whole set? Like, what do we get Carolyn Lyndon to sign it?
Yeah.
I think that's it's from Carolyn's personal collection. That's an existing sweater that I decided that we would coordinate with, and my shirt was the closest one I could find to the sweater that Carolyn already had. And then we had
slow down. Carolyn already had a sweater like that she didn't buy specifically for SMX.
I don't think she bought it at all. I think it was a gift.
Oh, I have to ask her about this. Okay.
Yeah.
It changes everything.
Cat's out of the bag.
Wow.
And it's riding a shark.
It was specifically for SMX. By the way, plug SMX. SMX is coming tomorrow?
SMX is today. If you're listening to this, viewing it on Tuesday, SMX is today, and it'll also be tomorrow. So please check us out. It's your last chance for experts only training, which is what our ad said, but it's not really your last chance, because even if you miss it, you're doing other things Tuesday and Wednesday. You can still catch us on demand. And it is our biggest conference of the year. It's also probably our most popular, which I guess just means the same thing that I just said twice, but it's well worth it. And it's much more affordable because you don't have to actually go to Seattle, which is usually where we are. Check it out. You won't be sorry.
Yep, and check out the SMX series altogether. There's a whole series of conferences.
You can use that extra money you save to buy a nice shirt.
You can.
It's hard to show in this view.
Cats doing LSD. I think we should probably move on to article number 3 before we break this podcast even more. All right, this one comes from George's employer, Search Engine Land, but it doesn't come from George. Sorry, George. It comes from Barry.
That's my air horn.
From Barry. Yeah, Jacob, how come we have an air horn effect on this show?
Oh, man. Because we aren't on at 6 a.m. during the drive time?
Oh, all right. Fine. I would try to mimic it because it's so good. Anyway, article number 3 comes from Search Engine Land. Google demotes libelous content in search through its predatory sites algorithms. Google will continue to try to surface high quality, relevant content while downgrading sites that attempt to exploit people's reputations unless their names are Erin Sparks. Anyway, this comes in response to a search from a New York Times article that talks about Google's search results containing sites that specifically slander and drag people through the mud. Google's calling this its predatory sites algorithm, which is aiming at removing such sites from appearing in the search results so that when you search someone by name, you don't get a whole bunch of slanderous crap about them from some slanderous, crappy website. Did I get the article pretty much summed up with my really highly technical and highly articulate way of describing it, George?
I mean, pretty good for you.
Wow.
So first of all, I want to say that Google is not referring to it as the predatory sites algorithm. That is something that we've nicknamed it internally. Oh. Well, more accurately, Barry named it as such. And I was like, all right, well, we have to be clear. Yeah.
Well, it's better than Barry calling it Florida 2 or 3.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have named it something because it's a really touchy subject when you get into these types of name queries. I was looking up a colleague that I had at a previous employer because sometimes it's just easier to look them up when they have a unique name than to actually go on LinkedIn and go through that extra step of finding them. But then I tried to do that and I was like, wow, this person has a lot of libelous content about them and about like cheating.
Maybe it was just accurate.
Like, that's, you're thinking like, okay, I need to get in touch with somebody. And then you see that and you're just like, I wonder if that's true, right? But the issue with these websites is that their business model revolves around essentially extorting people to take down that content. So anybody can upload content about, I don't know, let's say Erin Sparks, for example, and say that he, is a terrible person or does immoral things, which he doesn't. To my knowledge. But you can upload that content for free, Morty. But if it was Erin and he wanted to get it taken off, usually they would have to pay the publisher. And that kind of practice is now being demoted. So especially if the sites are advertising that they will take down that content if the user pays a fee, that is definitely going to get them knocked down. So that is what's happening. I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I'm all for this. I mean, except for Erin. Oh, we got to stop ranking on Erin. Hi, Erin. What's interesting, but yeah, by the way, that's a really good point. And if you're doing brand management online reputation management, there we go. This is great for you. This is a big win. What I find interesting about it is that Google
But I mean, if it's not an issue for your clients anymore, are you going to have clients? So that's the question.
Oh, there's always some kind of slander out there.
I mean, there's always a thing, right? Yeah. But the bigger the problem is, the more likely somebody's going to turn to an agency to get it resolved. That was a consideration I thought of as I was going through this story myself. I want to let you continue, but there is something for, we talk about it as it pertains to digital marketers, but I do want to talk about it as it pertains to the general user. But after you finish your thought, Morty.
No. You're our special guest, George. It's the George show.
When we think about what marketing has been like over the last year, and it's been a lot more about empathetic marketing. A lot of our KPIs went out the window last year. And all of this, I'm saying to frame the idea that people really matter and their struggles really matter. This type of content, you think about who it primarily affects. It will affect people who have had arrests, right? And that could be a mixed bag. Maybe it was a really justified arrest, or maybe that, it was something that they did as a young person that is continuing to haunt them. That'll be case by case. But I feel like women are particularly vulnerable to these kind of websites and this kind of content. It's just, unfortunately, the reality of this oftentimes very harsh and terrible world that we live in. And this change will hopefully go a long way in making things a lot less terrible. I mean, honestly, revenge porn is a thing, and growing up as a child, those are two words you don't think that would ever go together. But here we are, and it's enabled by the internet and doxing and all these other things. So Google is really kind of breaking from what it has always done by saying that, hey, we're going to let the algorithms handle everything. Last year we had that story about the racist search results for
Jewish baby strollers was one of them.
Right. That was the query, right?
I was going to bring that up.
Google said, well, it's a data void, and that's that. And that has been their attitude to everything that doesn't break their webmaster guidelines or isn't blatantly illegal, like scraping content or hosting, illegal downloads. But this is something new that they're doing, that the company is doing. And it is just so different in that it's a step in the right direction, but it also is a lot more human intervention in their algorithm. And I think that this is a great place for them to start. Clearly, there's a lot more, because some of these websites, for people, like if my name was spelled with like a Z at the end, right? There's not going to be that much content about me. There's a lot of other George Wins, but about me personally, there's not going to be that much content. And so if one website just had something negative written about me, that would likely show up, because there's not much more content for Google to show up. So that's another part of the problem we're seeing. It's great to be ranking these websites down when they are clearly predatory, but also if you don't have much of a digital footprint, you're still kind of left out in the cold. So that's another consideration.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very much. It is a great move by Google to do something like this, and you're right, it is uncharacteristic. And I had literally the same thought, and I'm glad you went there. My first thought in seeing this was, okay, great. So it was a couple of months ago. We were on this podcast. We were all here together, except for Erin, who was there, but was here, but is not here now. The query was Jewish baby strollers. And I remember my sister sent this to me. And what you get are basically grills instead of actual baby strollers. And it's a reference to the Holocaust, and it's really, really offensive. I know, because I'm Jewish, and I found it really offensive. And the entire Jewish community that I'm connected with also found it really, really offensive. And I actually brought up to Daddy Sullivan. You can listen to me talk about this on this podcast in an older episode. And the attitude was, well, those are the results that we have. That's how we understand it. Sometimes there's not, these funny kind of queries like Jewish baby strollers. Really aren't any Jewish baby strollers. It's hard for us to really understand it. Clearly, Google can understand it. Clearly, Google can do something about it, as it's doing here. So I am curious why in some cases it does do something about it, and in some cases it doesn't do anything about it.
Yeah, I would say this is low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. I was going to say, I'm curious to know, how does it determine what is slander or libel? Is it because it's mean, or is it because it's proven false somewhere else, or it's just an outlandish claim of some? Because, I mean, if I say something mean about Morty, but it's true, then am I going to be ranked lower?
Wouldn't you have to prove that it's true? I mean, if you just said that somebody cheated on someone else, right, then how are you going to prove that to be true unless you have actual evidence, in which case it becomes more of a very not safe for work term. And I think we're into different territory here. Mm-hmm. But also it's not news. I mean, you don't treat it's content very much like it's for the user.
Right.
It's pretty easy, for me at least. It's pretty easy to tell from the domain as a human being what kind of website this is, right? If you have a domain, if you have a database of sexual predators, people who have been convicted of horrible acts from, let's say, the local government, from, let's say, the New York State, I could clearly tell that this is not one of these sort of, low class, low brow, revenge kind of sites. And I think Google could probably do the same thing just by looking at the domain and looking at the content that's on the site.
But also, Google says like, we want to serve the user, right? And serving the user is, yes, what comes up in the search results in terms of the information they're looking for. But how often is it that you're looking for information about somebody, like about their negative history, right? The user is also a person who needs to be taken care of in terms of their career prospects or how they interact with on the web. Those opportunities are greatly hindered if you're not serving the users, because then really everybody's a victim, right? I mean, one of the examples in the original New York Times story was a CEO of like another company, a really well-known company. I forgot who it was, but it had all this negative information about him, an Elon Musk type, maybe not Elon Musk, but an Elon Musk type of figure. And it's just like, well, then everybody's fair game. Then all this information is meaningless, which means all of our search results really can't be that trusted. So in ensuring that we have the best search results is what is going to keep Google where it's at. And this just simply isn't that. I mean, whether or not it's true, users don't know that. They don't know it for sure. So when they read it, they have to question. They also are like, is this a really good result? Honestly, is it the best thing that we could be turning up? Is it better than turning up maybe nothing? Right? Because if you can't trust something about one individual that you know based off of the results on Google, what says that you can trust anything about any search result about anyone you know on Google?
Yeah, that's kind of my point with going back to the baby stroller thing. If Google was saying, hey, look, it's hard for us to understand these queries. There's really not a lot of other content because the query is just so bizarre. So then show nothing. And I get Google not being willing to do that because it makes them look bad. But in certain cases, that makes sense. And in certain cases, it clearly is what they should be doing. Again, I applaud Google for doing this. I think it should be taken one step further. I think you're right, George, that this is an area where it's clearly very visible. And it's clearly something that it's one of these issues that Google will take a lot of flack on if they don't do something about it. So they are doing something about it. I wish, though, that maybe they could be a little bit more altruistic and a little bit more consistent across the board. But
it's
maybe we'll have to
different
wait for
when it's an individual and you can definitely point to this individual and say, this person's career prospects are hurt. Or, this is how this story has damaged this person's family. It's really, the pain and suffering of, like, the pain and suffering of an entire group of people is enormous, and they cover that within the quality evaluators guidelines. But since what the victim is so many people in the case of the Jewish baby strollers query, I feel like Google can just be like, well, we can sort of wash our hands from this, because it is something of a relevant result still. But when you see it just hurting one person, I mean, that's online harassment, that's bullying. And those are just huge things that a company like Google cannot be associated with. They can't be seen promoting a result that encourages harassment or bullying. That's just not going to fly anywhere.
Yeah, I agree. By the way, good marketing lesson from this, the power of the individual story over the broader story. But what's also very powerful? SEO chat. SEO chat is this Thursday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, is being hosted by Nikki Mosier. I don't know what she's hosting about because I didn't book her. Carolyn Lyden booked her. And I have no idea what she's hosting about. But Nikki is brilliant. Nikki's amazing. SEO chat is always amazing. So be there at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday. Jacob, you're going to be there. George, will you be there?
Yeah, I'll be there. Nikki's legit.
Yeah, she is legit. Jacob?
I'll be there.
I'm making a list.
Okay.
And if you're both not there, then that's problematic.
I'll be there. What's happening Wednesday?
I forgot. I'm the worst for promoting. Nothing's happening Wednesday.
Oh, no.
I usually do open mic SEO on Clubhouse. Happens at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 3 p.m. British Standard Time, GMT time, whatever it's called, on Wednesdays. But I have a work thing, so I can't do it. I should just totally blow off the work thing and do Clubhouse.
Yeah, we can just do a Clubhouse where we all just talk about Morty.
That would be interesting.
You won't be there. I think Aaron would find a way to get on.
I will give you moderation over my room. That's what it's called, right? I know nothing about Clubhouse. It's called a room.
Yeah.
And you can have it, but just don't break it.
We'll give it to Aaron, and he can decide what to do with it based on his impression of this show today.
Well, that's good. He's got to listen to it really quickly then, because this comes out on Tuesday.
Right.
And then right. Okay, great. Well, that's it for Edge of the Wed. Edge of the...
Oh, no.
I screwed up.
Way to the edge.
I almost got through it. All right. Well, that's it for Edge News this week. Check out our first segment of Bill Slosky's interview this week. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel to get updated when we go live with our next show. George, thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Make sure to check out the new version of the SEO periodic table, and please attend SMX. I'd be very happy to see you there.
Wow, thanks for pitching that again. Really appreciated that. I'm just joking. Thanks for pitching that again. Jacob, thanks for reining me in and keeping me honest. Much appreciated.
Anytime.
Okay, good. I'll hold you to that. From all of us over at Edge, stay safe, stay well, and don't be a piece of cyber drift.